Good day, people of the interwebs. Today we will be taking a look at a video from D Marble about why he thinks satellites are a hoax. He seems like a nice enough guy, so I'll try to be nice in return. Oh, and one last thing before we get into this. There is a point in his video where I'll be muting it and speeding it up. He's got a clip, it's got some Star Wars music in it that I really don't want to get a copyright strike for having in this video. And I don't think you want to sit in silence for a minute. I will link the original video in the description so you can go back and verify that I'm not doing anything shady to misrepresent him or his argument. Now that that's all out of the way, let's get started. Take it away, Mr. Marble.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about satellites. Now, people claim that they've seen satellites at night. And I mean, I've seen things that moving across the sky at night also. You know, there's been points where I'd be looking up and I would see a light of some sort going across the sky. Yes, sure. But as far as being able to confirm whether or not that's actually a satellite, as we've been shown by the, spacefaring agencies, NASA in particular, we can't make that determination just by looking up and seeing a light.
That is true. We can't determine that just by looking up and seeing a light is in fact a satellite. However, we do have tools that can help us track, verify, and even see the satellites. There are instruments we can buy that can track them, phone apps, cameras like the P900 and P1000, telescopes, and websites that'll tell you when and where satellites, as well as the ISS, will be visible in your area. So we have ways of determining that the light we just saw was in fact a satellite, other than just by looking up and seeing the light from it. You can also use these tools to see satellites that are in geostationary orbits.
In addition to that, NASA's been caught faking so many times that I really don't trust anything that they have to say anyway.
Now, the only people that make the claims that NASA seems to fake things seems to be flat earthers, and every time they make these claims, the claims seem to get debunked. Yet, they continually make the accusation while pretending that those claims are not verifiably false. I don't know if it's deliberate dishonesty, cognitive dissonance, or a combination of the two, but at this point I just have to roll my eyes and sigh whenever I hear the claim made.
So if you do a quick Google search, you'll see satellites from NASA, and I mean, you'll see a lot of cartoons, CGI, imagery, artist depictions. Then you got to ask yourself how exactly these pictures of satellites are being taken, as if each satellite out in space have its own satellite that follows it along to take selfies or something.
Yes, NASA does use artist renditions sometimes, and they're very open about doing it and why they do it. We get actual photos of satellites by other satellites and astronauts on the ISS when they do flybys on them. It's not a difficult idea to grasp, and there's nothing dishonest or deceitful about it. If Ford released a bunch of drawings and paintings of the Mustang, you wouldn't call bullshit, and no one would say, oh, the Mustang must have another one around it taking selfies of it. If you've never seen one before and only seen the artist pictures and the photos of the car. So why discount satellites and NASA for doing the exact same thing? Also, what would there be to gain by faking the existence of satellites? People recognized we were on a globe thousands of years before Sputnik, so the argument that the infamous they are using them to try to make us think we're on a globe just doesn't work out.
Also, there's video of what seem to be satellites being launched from Antarctica, attached to weather balloons.
At a quick glance, they kind of do look like satellites, except for when you actually take a close look into them or look at them and dig into it. The only real resemblance is the solar panels. Everything else about the weather thing is completely different. They don't even have the same body shape or structure. Plus, they're encased in a protective cage type of thing to protect the instruments that are on board from damage when they come back down. Also, since flat earthers keep saying over and over and over again that we can't go to Antarctica, even though that's complete bullshit, why would NASA release videos of the launches if they were perpetrating a hoax? Wouldn't they just use the secrecy and inaccessibility to hide their fake satellite launches?
Then, of course, the last couple years there's been multiple videos surfacing of satellites, in quotes, crashing in South America.
Yeah, when a satellite reaches the end of its life cycle or usefulness, the space organizations will fire the propulsion system to knock them out of their orbit and get them heading back towards Earth using the Earth's atmosphere to try to burn them up. He has no link to this video, so we really don't know what or where this thing fell. For all we know, it could be one of those things launched by a weather balloon that just came back down wrong and got smashed up when it hit the ground, or it could be a satellite. We don't know since no sources are given, and we have no way of knowing what the hell that thing actually was. All we can see is solar panels and some twisted shit. That's all we got to go by.
Then we have to take into consideration from all the data that we're given, these images that were given officially of how many satellites are actually supposed to be up there orbiting the Earth. Now, the thing about these satellites is that we're told that these satellites from these vast distances out in space are constantly beaming these crystal clear high-def images back to the Earth from millions of miles away. Although I find it odd that we tend to drop calls in between cities, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose.
I think he might have forgotten that sat phones are a thing. There's two types of mobile phones. You have cell phones, which use line-of-sight cell towers to send signal, and those are the ones that most people use for normal day-to-day communication through companies like Verizon and AT&T. They use line-of-sight cell phone towers, so when you lose that line of sight, you lose your signal. Then we have sat phones, or satellite phones, that actually do use satellites to send the signal. Aside from weather problems and certain atmospheric conditions, they are a hell of a lot more reliable than regular cell phones, and they are used where there are no cell towers. They're used mainly by military and groups of people working in areas that are either out of the range of cell towers or in areas where cell service or that line of sight signal would be interrupted.
Now, let's take a look at some of these images and give them a critical analysis. In particular, let's look at the pictures of Earth from space. Now, you'll notice that the pictures of Earth from these satellites are always sent back as, oriented as we've been taught to view the Earth. There's always the northern hemisphere is at the top and the southern hemisphere is at the bottom. We always see pictures of the Earth oriented this way when they're presented to us as actual pictures of the Earth, which I find odd.
It's really not that hard to understand why this is done. We tend to view the northern hemisphere as the top of the globe because that's how we have chosen to orient maps and globes. North is at the top, south is at the bottom. The pictures are released oriented like that because, that's what we're used to seeing, and it just makes the photo of the Earth easier to recognize for everybody. Anyone can look at it and instantly know what they're looking at and not have to try to turn the image in their head for it to make any kind of sense. Having a satellite orient itself or just flip the picture before it's released isn't dishonest or deceitful. It's because it's still the same actual image, just flipped upside down.
Because, well, here, let me get to this. One of my favorite go-tos when I speak about flat Earth is that bodies of water don't curve, that water seeks to find its level, that the surface of water is always generally flat. And the response that follows from the heliocentric enthusiast is typically in reference to gravity, or when I talk about water sticking to the bottom of a spinning ball, they'll talk about relativity, basically how the Earth is out in space and there's no up or down in space, things like that. Now again, being that there's no up or down in space, one would have to wonder exactly how every single time these pictures of the Earth are given to us, how they're always oriented north at the top, south at the bottom.
I just explained why. It would be like reading something written backwards or upside down. Yeah, you can do it, and for an adult, it's not all that difficult, but those pictures are put out there for everyone, and so they're shown in a way that's easy for everyone, adults and kids, to recognize, with the northern hemisphere being up and the southern hemisphere being at the bottom. It's not a difficult concept to grasp.
Some way or another, these satellites would have to be focused out in space and oriented properly each time to get these pictures to show up that way. This would mean that the vast majority of the time that pictures of the Earth that are being sent from whatever satellite being beamed back to the Earth from millions of miles away is always the preferable angle of the Earth that we have been taught in the educational system, and nobody seems to question that. Well, at least some people aren't buying it.
Find rocks on the ground. On the ground, so you have ground in the ocean.
No.
At the very bottom you might, but they don't go above the surface. They do not go above the water.
This is not the real one because that's fake. It's fake.
We're on this.
I didn't push it.
Do not push very hard. If you do that, then you're gonna. Do not push. You're gonna get dense.
Look, there's a dent.
Yeah, don't push on this.
Yeah, kindergartners understand that the globe in the classroom is not the Earth that they're standing on. One is small and plastic, the other's big as hell and made from rock and dirt. Tiny humans don't quite grasp the concept of representation or models. And if the kids are saying it's fake because they think the Earth is flat, well, they're wrong. And that just goes to show that flat earthers have the mentality of 5-year-olds.
Now here's an example of a person zooming in on an airplane flying overhead. Now let's look at the factors. The camera is attached to a tripod. The tripod is stable on the ground. Stable tripod, camera mounted on top of it. The airplane is somewhere between 17 to 35,000 feet, roughly. Now the speed of the airplane is somewhere around 300 to 500 miles per hour. The man has to lock in on the airplane from the ground, and the camera is being used manually. It's tracking the airplane manually while it's taking the video. Okay, it's not by remote, not by a huge distance, just with those factors in place. 300 to 500 miles per hour, 17,000 to 35,000 feet. I mean, let's say 7 miles away, somewhere around there. Okay, and then the camera is in a fixed position on a tripod, locked in. Okay, and still he's having a hard time zooming in and getting a good lock on the airplane.
As for his assumption on the plane in this video, that's all they are, his assumptions. How do we know a tripod is being used? His altitude range has a difference of 1,800 feet. His speed assumption has a difference of 200 miles an hour. Both of those things are quite large gaps to just be guessing on. Then he says the person filming is, quote, let's say 7 miles away. Where the fuck did he get that from? Pulled that completely out of his ass with absolutely nothing to base it on. He has a hard time locking onto the plane because of camera shake. When you're zoomed in like that, any little jiggle, wiggle, or shake has a drastic effect on your target. It's the same as using a scope on a rifle. Okay, so let's just see where he's going with this.
Now, one video that I've been delving into, taking a really close look at, is the one from NASA's website where they show that the moon is transiting across the face of the Earth. And that was from the Earth Polychromatic Imaging Camera. This was back in 2015 when that happened. So, that 20-second video, let's think about this. What NASA's telling us is that 20-second video took place July 16th, 2015. Over the course of that time span, basically, that time lapse was pictures taken over the course of almost 5 hours. And what they did, they spliced those pictures together and create that 20-second video that's being shown right now. Let's think about the epic for a second. That camera that was taking those pictures of Earth for that amount of time, all right, was said to be 1 million miles away. So it's this camera out in space, zoomed in from 1 million miles away. And they're saying it's been locked in for almost 5 hours, okay? 4 hours and 55 minutes, while the Earth is still orbiting around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. That means that this 20-second clip of those pictures being spliced together means that the Epic was able to track the Earth as it moved 329,372 miles through space. And it was able to take those pictures in such a spectacular order and splice them all together as if the Earth were in a fixed position. What I did, I went in a little closer and I pulled up the schematic for the Epic. And on the schematic, it shows a lot of components that are used to capture images. Okay, lots of that going on, but as far as propulsion and moving that camera around, moving that satellite to get those pictures perfectly locked in, there's only one means of propulsion, and that's at the bottom. Okay, the propulsion module at the bottom. Now, if we're out in space and there's no base, there's no foundation, there's no up, down, there's no left or right, there's no direction out in space because it's all relative, right? So there would have to be an exceptionally complex navigational system in order to keep that camera locked in on the Earth at that distance for that amount of time.
It wouldn't have to be all that complex. It's not zoomed in super tight on the Earth. It's still far enough out where the moon goes between the Earth and the camera. And where does he think the satellite's going to go? It's in an orbit, so it's not just going to float away into space.
If you can find the schematic, if you can find someone that can properly explain how a camera from 1 million miles away was able to zoom in on the Earth, lock in while the Earth travels through space, and is able to take pictures, these crystal clear high def images, and beam them back real time, create this beautiful time lapse of the moon transiting in front of the Earth with only one means of propulsion and navigating this satellite.
I want to know why he thinks that one propulsion module would have anything to do with the satellite not being able to hold its position for 4 hours at a distance of 1 million miles. And like I said before, the camera isn't zoomed in very tight. Hell, we can see a shit ton of space all around the Earth.
You let me know. I'm calling BS on the whole thing, personally. Now let's look at another aspect of this whole situation. The analogy I like to use in comparison to when items leave the Earth, what I've been thinking about now is, think of a person driving a car down the freeway at 60 miles per hour. Okay, if there's a fly buzzing around inside that car, the driver gets annoyed, rolls the window down. The fly gets sucked out of the window of the car. Suddenly the fly is independent of the car. The car continues moving. The fly's out, buzzing over the freeway, back in the rear view. All right, so you got to ask yourself, Is it possible that the fly can ever actually catch up to the car? Absolutely not. That's a physical impossibility. The fly cannot flap its wings fast enough to ever catch up with that car. Period. Point blank. Not gonna happen.
Well, he's not entirely right, but he also isn't entirely wrong. The reason the fly gets splattered on the windshield of the car behind is, well, air. The air creates drag and wind resistance, so the fly could not catch up with or even just stay next to the car. In space, however, there is no drag, no air, no wind resistance. It's a vacuum. The fly would go out the window, and it would be traveling at the same speed of the car with no opposing force to slow it down. Just like when with the Epic satellite, when it left our atmosphere, the window, traveling at the same speed as the Earth, the car, with nothing to slow it down, there it is. It's just hanging there next to us. Then, on top of that, you have the sun's gravity pulling the Earth and everything else along with it at a constant speed.
Now, if DARPA were to retrofit a microscopic camera and mount it to that fly, the way that the fly is moving through the air, if it were able to zoom back into on the car some way or another, do you really think that the fly would be able to take perfect pictures of that car in the same place and from the same position, the same angle, over the course of 5 hours? I don't think so.
Well, the answer would be no. And the reason is because of the air, drag, and wind resistance. Those things not only would slow the fly down, but also create turbulence. These are all things that the Epic doesn't have to deal with because, well, space is a vacuum. It's like flat earthers can't grasp more than one concept or situation at a time. The environments of the fly in the Epic are completely different. His analogy is like trying to compare apples to purple aliens wearing hats with little propellers on them.
So, with that, let's look at some of the numbers, okay? Did a little more digging, and this is what I came up with. Now, according to NASA, the Earth Polychromatic Imaging Camera, or the EPIC, was launched February 11th, 2015. Those pictures that were on the NASA website for that time lapse showing the moon transiting the Earth, that was those pictures were said to have been taken July 16th, 2015. Now, the amount of time between those two dates was 155 days. Now, 24 hours times 155 days gives us 3,720 hours. Now, with that in mind, we have to take into consideration that according to the heliocentric model, the sun is said to be dragging the Earth and the rest of the planets along through the solar system, through the infinite vacuum of space at a speed of 514,000 miles per hour. Now, 514,000 times 3,720, okay, this means that from the time the Epic was launched in February to when those pictures were taken in July, that the Earth had moved 1,912,080,000 miles through space. Well over 1 billion miles through space. Okay? The Epic's independent of the Earth. Earth continues to move. Alright? But some way or another, in July, the Epic was only 1 million miles away. Given the schematic showing us that the propulsion system was only in one spot, only able to fire that satellite in one direction, how exactly was it able to keep pace with the Earth at that speed?
Very simply, and I just explained it. Because in space, there is no air or anything to create drag to slow the satellite down. So the satellite would be continuously traveling at the exact same speed as the Earth. Plus, we have the gravity of the sun and the Earth. The sun's gravity doesn't just pull the planets along with it, but also everything else in the solar system as well. This includes satellites. It's also being held at a distance of 1,000,000 miles by the Earth's gravity. So it's actually got the gravitational pull of two objects pulling it along with them in a vacuum with no drag and nothing else to slow it down. Simple.
Was it being dragged in the sun's gravitational pull? Maybe the Earth's gravitational pull?
Yep. In fact, it's both.
The entire time? The propulsion system would not be sufficient to keep up with the Earth over the course of that period of time for that distance. There's absolutely no way. 1,912,080,000 miles is the amount of space through which the Earth had moved between February 11th and July 16th.
It wouldn't need its propulsion system to keep up with the Earth, based on, well, gravity of the Earth and Sun and being in a vacuum, as I explained just a few minutes ago, and, well, he explained part of it just a second ago.
And on July 16th, NASA says that the Epic was taking those pictures from that fixed position only 1,000,000 miles away. And yet, over the course of that 4 hours and 45 minutes, the Earth had moved 318,250 miles through space. Again, without any base on which the camera would rest, without any real-time manual orientation. Okay, we're talking about someone's operating the Epic from Earth via remote from millions of miles away. And they believe it.
We have no reason to doubt it. The physics work. And I'm talking about the physics of reality, not the physics of pretend that flat earthers use. The reason D thinks that those photos are impossible is because he can only wrap his head around our environment here on Earth, and he doesn't understand that things are different in the vacuum of space. He doesn't seem to grasp the concepts of a vacuum and of gravity.
I'm not buying it. I'm calling BS on the whole thing. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments section. I just wanted to share that with you, this little thought exercise. This is just something I've been contemplating. Like, that part kind of doesn't make sense if you really, really think about it. How exactly would that satellite be able to, one, take those pictures without any real-time navigational system on hand, with the propulsion system only in one spot on that particular satellite attachment? And then how is it able to pace the Earth when the Earth is moving, 500,000 miles per hour? I mean, seriously. But this is the stuff that people have to believe if they're going to defend the heliocentric model. It's actually pretty ridiculous. But anyway, go ahead and leave a comment below about what you thought about the video. Just wanted to share that with you. Thanks for tuning in. As always, be good to each other, take care of yourself, and stay flat. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Alright, so that does it for D Marvel's video on satellites being a hoax. I'm not going to address his ending questions because I already have, several times in fact. The mental gymnastics that flat earthers have to perform in their refusal to accept reality and that they might be wrong just amazes me. To defend their idea, they have to downright ignore and deny, with nothing to back up their denial, reality and things that can be shown as demonstrably true. I'll just leave it here at that. Feel free to comment, and as always, thanks for watching.